Good morning from Sridham Mayapur, dear devotees. Hare Krishna. This is our daily class in Srimad Bhagavatam. Welcome to take part. Shri Guru Nitai Gaur. Try closing the door. Jaya Kunja Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Jaya Kunja Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Nandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Charanarottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamaniraya Vede Namayanishchara Purane Bharate Taka Adavande Chamadye Chani Sarati Gite Mukam Kalavivachalam Bhangam Bandayate Givim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shivaram Nataranam Madhava Padunga Luchi Makaranda Se Makaranda Panakori Anande Bolo Hari Hari Haringa Name Vandavela Marigori Chakadona Se Chakadolanga Paraye Manamo Niranjare Manamo Niranjare Rahu Krishna Bole Jiva Jan Krishna Bole Jao Jiva Motu Dada Radha Motu Dada Radha Motu Dada Radha. Read from Granthada Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25. We're almost finished with this chapter. This is about devotional service and teachings of Lord Kapila Dev. And today we're on text number 41. Nanyatra mad bhagavata pradhana purusheshvarat atmana sarva bhutanam bhayam tivram nivartate. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself, for I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. Srila Prabhupada has described in his purport. It is indicated herein that the cycle of birth and death cannot be stopped unless one is a pure devotee of the Lord. It is said, Harim vina na mitam taranti. One cannot surpass the cycle of birth and death unless one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The same concept is confirmed herewith. One may take to the system of understanding the absolute truth by one's own imperfect sensory speculation, or one may try to realize the self by the mystic yoga process. But whatever one may do, unless he comes to the point of surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no process can give him liberation. One may ask if this means that those who are undergoing so much penance and austerity by strictly following the rules and regulations are endeavoring in vain. The answer is given by Srimad Bhagavatam 10.2.32. Yene Ravadaksha Vimuktanamina. Lord Brahma and other demigods prayed to the Lord when Krishna was in the womb of Devotee. Quote, my dear lotus-eyed Lord, there are persons who are puffed up with the thought that they have become liberated, or one with God who have become God. But in spite of thinking in such a puffed up way, their intelligence is not laudable. They are less intelligent. It is stated that their intelligence, whether high or low, is not even purified. In purified intelligence, a living entity cannot think otherwise than to surrender. Bhagavad Gita therefore confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavanam prapadyate. After many, many births, one who is actually advanced in intelligence surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. Without the surrendering process, one cannot achieve liberation. The Bhagavatam says, those who are simply puffed up, thinking themselves liberated by some non-devotional process, are not polished or clear in intelligence, for they've not yet surrendered unto you. In spite of executing all kinds of austerities and penances, or even arriving at the brink of spiritual realization, in Brahman realization, they think that they are in the effulgence of Brahman. But actually, because they have no transcendental activities, they fall down to material activities. One should not be satisfied simply with knowing that one is Brahman one must engage himself in the service of the Supreme Brahman. That is bhakti. The engagement of Brahman should be the service of Parabrahman. It is said that unless one becomes Brahman, one cannot serve Brahman. The Supreme Brahman is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the living entity is also Brahman. Without realization that he is Brahman, spirit soul, in eternal serviture of the Lord, if one simply thinks that he is Brahman, his realization is only theoretical. He has to realize and at the same time engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. Then he can exist in the Brahman status. Otherwise, he falls down. The Bhagavatam says that because non-devotees neglect the transcendental loving service of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, their intelligence is not sufficient, and therefore these persons fall down. The living entity must have some activity. If he does not engage in the activity of transcendental service, he must fall down to material activity. As soon as one falls down to material activity, there's no rescue from the cycle of birth and death. It is stated here by Lord Kapila, without my mercy, nanyachamat bhagavata. The Lord is stated here to be Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, indicating that he is full of all opulences and is therefore perfectly competent to deliver one from the cycle of birth and death. He is also called Pradhan because he is the Supreme. He's equal to everyone, but to one who surrenders to him, he is especially favorable. It is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that the Lord is equal to everyone. No one is his enemy, and no one is his friend, but that to one who surrenders unto him, he is especially inclined. By the grace of the Lord, simply by surrendering unto him, one can get out of this cycle of birth and death. Otherwise, one may go on in many, many lives and many, many times attempt other processes for liberation. Gora Draganya Gana Go to Goloruharam Goran Gudatama Gopyada Kopa Upalagada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshika Varam Sakatam Vanchapapati Vishchan Kripa Sindhu Devachan Patitanam Padani Vaishnavi Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama. Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture on this verse, and which appears in the book Teachings of Lord Kapila Dev. I'd like to just read a few words from it. He says, presently we are so dull and foolish that we do not know what is bhayam and tibram. The word tibram means very terrible, and bhayam means very fearsome. We are entangled by a very terrible fear, but we have become so dull due to the spell of Maya that we do not care. At the time of death, there are many troubles, and we become very fearful. Sometimes when a person is dying, he falls into a coma and lies unconscious. We do not know what kind of fearful test this person is undergoing. He may be dreaming so many things, or he may be crying. He cannot express what is going on. Those who are very sinful especially die in this way. So, this verse speaks something about the nature of death. Srila Prabhupada sometimes would say that death is as sure as death. You can't hide from death. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Mrityu sarva haraschaham, that I am the personification of death. someone may not believe in God, but God manifests before everyone according to their level of consciousness. And he also manifests before the atheists, those who don't believe in God, or to put it in another way, they don't believe there's anything superior to themselves. There's no absolute controller. And so that absolute controller appears before them in the form of death. In the Mukundamala Stotra, it's described, Ascharjametadi manushaloke sudham parichaja vishankibanti namani narayana gocharani chadvani vacha kuhaka patanti. This is Ascharjametat manusha tadi manushaloke. The most ascharjan, the most amazing thing in this world is that people, they reject chanting Krishna's names, and instead, that nectar of his names, which will give immortality, and instead they drink poison by speaking everything else. In the Mahabharata, there's a famous conversation between Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, and Yudhishthira Maharaj, the great pious devotee and king. And Yamaraj famously asks, what is the most amazing thing in the world? Ascharya Param. What is the most amazing thing? And Yudhishthira Maharaj replied, Ahani Hani Bhutani Gachantiha Yamalayam Seshastavaram Ichanti Kimascha. The most amazing thing is that every day, millions and hundreds of millions of people are going to the kingdom of death. They're all dying. But still, Seshastavaram Ichanti. They're aspiring. Ichanti means that they desire to have Seshastavaram, some permanent situation in this world. But a devotee has more wisdom. A devotee lives in reality. And as we often comment, reality, no matter how depressing, is always preferable to illusion, no matter how cheerful the illusion may be. Blessed are those persons, like our friend Lynn, who work with death and see death as a daily thing. When the coronavirus thing came up, we were, at that time, when it started becoming more prominent, we were with a group of devotees at Govardhan and Braj, and I was giving a talk. And I told them that for myself, I'm very happy with this thing. Because many times I'm traveling and I go to LAX airport, I go to New York airport, I travel, and I think everything is so nice, it's so beautiful, and there's so many beautiful girls, and they tell me like that, and there's so, everything is so nice, there's so many nice foods to eat, there's so many good things here. Life is good. And I forget that just behind that thin facade, death is waiting. But when the coronavirus came, it makes me very happy. Now I can see death in front of me. There's a nice story true story. There was one famous wealthy landlord who lived in East Bengal, current Bangladesh. His name was Lala Babu. And he used to go for walks a little distance. He had a huge mansion on one side of the Padma River. And he would walk along the banks of the river. And one day while he was walking along, he heard a boatman telling his fellow boatman, "Oh brother, the day is over, go across." When he heard the words of that boatman, Lala Babu became very contemplative. And he crossed the river by boat and returned home. The next day, while he was walking, he happened to hear the voice of a washerman speaking to his wife. And the washerman told her, "The day is over, now go and burn the basana." Basana is an interesting word in Bengali. In Bengali, it's so nice. In Vedic culture, everything is used in a nice way. They take the banana plants, the bark of the banana tree, they burn that, and they make some ash from that. It becomes alkaline, and they use that for washing clothes. And that burnt ash is called basana, or the bark of the banana tree is called basana. So, but basana also has another meaning. Basana also means desire or passion. And so when he just happened to hear this washerman having a conversation with his wife, Lala Babu, he took it to mean the day is over. The days of your life are also over. Now quickly burn your lusty desires. So hearing these comments from the boatman and the washerman, they left a very deep impression on him, although they weren't speaking directly about something spiritual. But after hearing these things, Lala Babu, he gave up his family, he gave up all of his possessions, and he came to Vrindavan. And there he began performing bhajan. And in 1810 AD, Lala Babu installed a famous deity called Sri Krishna Chandra, which is still there today in a very wonderful, magnificent stone temple. The Vishnu Smriti describes that we can't avoid death, and we should be realistic about it. Sometimes people, they tell devotees, you people are so depressing. We often tell the story of our friend Stamba, who before he was a devotee, he was in the university somewhere, I think in South Carolina, if I'm not incorrect. And one day he had been invited to some university party, and there's all kinds of boys and girls, and everybody's drinking and smoking and playing loud music and dancing. And somehow he was feeling lonely in the midst of a crowd. It's a very beautiful thing to feel lonely in the midst of a crowd. And many people who are becoming transcendentalists, they find themselves in that situation. Although he didn't know anything about Bhagavad Gita or anything about the soul, still he was feeling like there's something wrong with me. Everybody's having so much fun, but I don't feel like I belong to this. So he was sitting by himself off in the corner, and after some time, a pretty young girl came over to talk to him, and she said kind of stuff, whatever pretty young university girls talk about, really deep topics like records and music and shoes and makeup and I don't know, whatever important things are like that. And she was talking on and on for a while. And he was quiet in their conversation, and finally she ran out of important things to say. And she was quiet. And in the lull of their conversation, it was kind of his turn to say something, and he turned to her with seriousness, sincerity, and he asked her, have you ever thought about death? And when he said that to the young girl, her eyes got very big, and she said, you can't talk like that here. You're going to spoil the whole party. So this is the nature of devotees, they spoil the whole party. But Vishnu Smriti says that's good. Drishalokamanakandam riyamanas chabandavan dharmam ekam saharyartam varayadvam siddhanaraha. Having seen that there's no help to be had in this world, and that all your relations are dying, all your friends are dying, one after another, then you should take dharma or virtue as your only real association. We cry when someone dies. Mrityo pi bandhava sakto nanagantam naramritam jaya varjam hisarvasya yamya panta virudhite. He says, even if they die together, a relative is not able to follow a dying relative. And the verse describes jaya varjam hisarvasya yamya panta virudhite. Other than one's faithful wife, everyone else is forbidden to follow a dying person on the path of death. Therefore, svakaryam adyakurvita purvane chaparanikam nahi pratikshate mrityu kritam vashanavakritam. Tomorrow's business should be done today, and the afternoon's business should be done in the forenoon. Whether a person has done it or not, death will not wait. Na prapto kalamriyate vidasada satayarapi kushagranapi samspishta prapto kala najivati. One won't die. You can't die before your time has arrived. There's a group, a small group in America. What was it called? The Bumblebee Club, I think? Or something like that. Is a group of people who jumped out of airplanes at something like over 10,000 feet in the air, and whose parachutes didn't work, but they lived. It's not a very big group. But there are some people, and somehow they landed in water, they landed in a tree or something, and miraculously they died. Whereas other people, there's a story we heard, I think it was in Washington State, that there was one person who had parachuted so many times, and so he was going for his like 10,000th time to parachute, jump out of an airplane. And it was on television, everybody was filming it, and the person was very proud, I've done this so many times, and so expert. He jumped out of the airplane, but he made a small mistake. He forgot to bring his parachute. And so on live television in front of everybody, there was a big splat, and he died. So the verse describes naprapta kalamliyate vidasara satirapi, that someone won't die before their time has come, even though they may be pierced by so many arrows, nor will they live after their time has expired, even if they're merely touched by a blade of grass. Srila Prabhupada speaks about this death in many, many places. People find it very depressing, but I find it inspiring. I like to live in reality. There's one lecture Prabhupada gave in Gorakhpur in 1971. He said, similarly, miserable condition of death. When one is lying in a coma, so many sufferings are going on, so many dreaming. The Yamadutas are the servants of the Lord of Death, Yamaraj. They're coming. And sometimes a man on the deathbed cries. He's suffering so much, but there's no remedy. Everyone is helpless. So that miserable condition of death is there. There's a story I wanted to tell from a friend of ours, senior devotee, disciple of Srila Prabhupada, very wonderful devotee, named Subhangi. And some years ago, she got a phone call from her parents notifying that her father was very sick with prostate cancer. And this prostate cancer had developed so far it had gone into his bones. They tried chemotherapy twice, but it failed both times. And so she rang him after some time, and her father, who she always took shelter of, was always a tough kind of guy, the father was crying on the phone. He told her, I'm dying. And Subhangi Mataji, she tried to console him. And later she recounted, she said that I told him, don't worry, there's reincarnation, you're not your body, you'll be okay, just pray, God is kind. But it didn't go over very big. She said later, she said it was not very much comfort for someone who's bewildered and who didn't know God. And later I'll read you some things that she said, very interesting story. She said, after that, I felt like I was somehow connected to his suffering. I could feel all of his fear and anxiety. I would pray all the time. I didn't want to experience any of it, but I guess I was karmically connected to him, so there was no escape no matter how far away I was. The physical suffering was nothing compared to the mental torture he was experiencing. He became humble. And finally, I dropped everything a few times and flew from Vrindavan to be with him. She said in the past, he never wanted to hear anything about Krishna, so I'd given up trying years ago to speak to him about it. We never talked about this topic. I would just give him prasadam. He'd love my cooking. And I would talk to him about other things. But this time when I came, she said, I had some dust from Vrindavan, some sacred dust, and some Jamuna water from the sacred river Jamuna, mixed with the sacred Ganga water. And I also brought my Jagannath deities. And I put all those things in the house, hoping that they would have some effect, and I would put them in Father's food whenever I could. And I kept praying that somehow, hoping that I could convince him about Krishna before he died. But he was so bewildered and so humbled by his lack of control by the situation that finally he was willing to listen a little bit. And so she started reading about Bhagavad Gita, about the eternality of the soul. And he told her that he found it comforting. And she would also read to him from the book Coming Back. And she said that he liked the idea about reincarnation, gave him something positive to look forward to. And she saw that she thought to herself, anyway, I'm chanting, so everything's going to be okay. She recounted, I'll read her words, she said, I really believed that you could just chant Hare Krishna and all bad things would go away. I guess this is a superficial and neophyte viewpoint. Interesting comment. The material world is such a heavy place, and with my great ego, I was overestimating my own purity. I realized later that I'm really not even a devotee. And if you can't save yourself, how can you possibly save anyone else? So Subhangi Mataji, she was going back and forth to Vrindavan several times. Her family was there, children, and husband. And finally she's in Vrindavan, and one day her mother rang her, and she told him, please come. He's in the hospital. We need you now. And so she got on the first flight, and she went there, and miraculously let her move into the hospital with her father. And she later recounted, she said it was just incredible. She felt how Krishna arranged things. They gave him a private room, and they let her sleep there in the room and take care of him. And she said nobody questioned her authority. And her mother was a Roman Catholic and usually wouldn't let her speak about Krishna, just kind of backed off and let her do everything. And so she would sleep next to her dad, and she took care of his every need. It's a beautiful thing to be a caretaker for people who are leaving this world. Lynn just wrote me something about it. I was fortunate to be there. Maybe we'll tell a little bit of the story in a minute. When one of my teachers, Fakir Mohan Prabhu, left his body. It's a very, very special thing to help someone when they're leaving. So she was trying to take care of him. She put Tulsi neck beads on him, which if someone's wearing Tulsi, it's said in Shastra that that person won't take birth again. But the demoniac nurse who was there kept taking him off. And so she would just put them back on again. And she would come back in the room and see the neck bead, and she'd take them off again. And Subhangi said, I would just smile very sweetly at her and put them right back on again. And she said she kept reading Bhagavad Gita to him. And for the last 12 days up to his death, he didn't eat anything. And for 8 of those days, the only thing that he took was water from the Ganga and the Jamuna and nothing else. She was controlling everything that went in his mouth, and she started sprinkling Vrindavan dust in his water as well. And she said that toward the end, things were changing, and he started seeing things that other people couldn't. She said, she gave some example. Every night she would wear a t-shirt with a picture of Lord Shiva on it to bed, and then she would wait till he was asleep, and then she'd sprinkle a little Vrindavan dust on his head in case he died while he was asleep. And one night, she sprinkled that dust on his head, and suddenly he opened his eyes, and he looked up and he said, oh, you're all surrounded by dust. Interesting thing. He couldn't even perceive what was going on, that externally, the dust going on his head. And then another night, he woke up and he looked at a Shiva t-shirt and said, careful, there's fire coming out of your shirt. And the day before he died, he became very, very frightened. And he said there were big dogs in the room. And there was an ugly person floating outside the window. And the evening, just before his death, he started calling out, untie my legs, untie my legs. And then about 9:30 at night, her daughter was there with her. And she woke her up and she said, Mom, come quickly, something's happening to Granddad. And she ran over to the bed and she found her father was crying, please, please, let me loose, let me loose. And he was crying, he was terrified, he was shaking. And it's over and over again, he was saying those things. And even though he didn't have the strength to urinate without someone helping him, still he was trying to jump off the bed and hide under his pillow. It was just skin and bone, she said. But he was terrified, he was thrashing around. She thought, this is really, really bad. And she grabbed him and she said, but what's happening? Are you okay? And he told her, I tried to get away, but they got me. And then he was crying out again, for God's sake, just let me rest for 10 minutes. I beg you, leave me alone. And then she'd start chanting with him, and he would relax a little bit. And then the nurse would come in and distract her from chanting, and he'd start thrashing around and begging again. And finally, she asked the nurse, what's going on? And she told her that, oh, it's normal, he's just fighting death. It happens to everyone. She said, we even have a term for it. It's called terminal restlessness. And they give some nurses seminars about how to deal with it. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, her daughter woke up again, and she told her that, Mata, I see these terrible persons in the room. And she told her daughter, I think these are the Yamadutas. She said, yes, I saw 3 of them floating over his bed. And he was scared, and he was looking up at them, and he was calling out. And she said, she described, just like was found in the Bhagavatam, these very fearsome persons with like boar-like tusks coming out their mouths and red glaring eyes. At the time, she thought they were like some kind of ghost trying to take his soul out of the body. And so she was crying and praying to Krishna and Prabhupada, please help him, help him. And she was holding on to him, and she asked him, do you want me to chant? He said, yes, yes. And she started chanting. She said, have they still got you? And he said, no, they let me go. And so she held him tight for the next 3 hours. And then very slowly he gave up his life through his mouth while she was chanting in his ear and dripping Ganga and Jamuna water into his mouth. And she said that her father was always a womanizer. He was a very sinful person. But somehow, by the mercy of the devotees, he had a very auspicious departure. Srila Prabhupada, he writes, and he spoke in one lecture in Denver in 1975, he says, to see the Yamadutas, or the carriers of the order of Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, the time of death means a very sinful person. They're very fearsome looking. And sometimes a man on the deathbed becomes very fearful and starts crying, save me, save me. There are many different stories we found like this. There's another Mataji who was distributing books in Auckland, New Zealand. Her name is Rasayata Dasi. And she was distributing a book called, probably one of Prabhupada's books called Journey of Self-Discovery to some man who was like in his 50s. And as she was showing him the book, it happened to open up to a picture of the Yamadutas coming for a jamil. And when the man saw that picture, he began to shake in fear. And he said, this looks exactly like the people that my best friend told me were coming to him when he had a recent near-death experience. My friend lived to speak about it. He became a changed man. Although everybody else was laughing at him, he said that there were these scary creatures coming at him with a rope. And he bought a book from her. In the Rig Veda, it describes that Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, he has dogs. There's 2 primary dogs called Shama and Sabala, black and spotted, and they're the sons of Sarma, or the female bitch of the Devatas, so they're also called the Saramayas. And these dogs, they say they have 4 eyes and big nose, and they're said to wander around men as the messengers of Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. And they come to someone who's about to die. But for devotees, their situation is completely different, as we were hearing from Srila Prabhupada. In the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, 12th chapter, text 30, is a beautiful verse describing how Dhruva Maharaj, the great devotee, how he left this world, how he died. And it said there, Tadotana pada putro, tadarshanantakam gatam, mityo mudni padam datva, arurodadumam griham. That when he was leaving this world, a transcendental airplane came from the spiritual world, which very few people could see. And at that time, Dhruva Maharaj saw death personified approaching him. But Dhruva Maharaj didn't even care for death. He needed some steps to get up on the transcendental airplane. So he put his foot on the head of death. And he stepped into that airplane. And for the devotees then, they're not afraid of death. Death is just something to help them to progress back to the spiritual world of Krishna. In the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, chapter 2, text 49, Srila Prabhupada has written, at the time of death, one is certainly bewildered because his bodily functions are in disorder. At that time, even one who has throughout his life practiced chanting the holy name of the Lord may not be able to chant the Hare Krishna mantra very distinctly. What do you do? It may happen. Nevertheless, such a person receives all the benefits of chanting the holy name. While the body is fit, therefore, why should we not chant the holy name of the Lord loudly and distinctly? If one does so, it's quite possible that even at the time of death, he'll be able to properly chant the holy name with love and faith. Baladev Vidyabhushan's commentary on Vishnu Sahasranam, in text 88, he quotes a beautiful verse from the Varaha Purana, where Krishna says, Yadi vatari doshena mad bhakta mam cha na cha smaret. Aham smarami mad bhaktam nayami paramam gatim. If at the time of death, he says, my devotee is not able to remember me, yadi vatari doshena, because of some disturbances felt in the body, he says, then aham smarami mad bhaktam. I'll remember my devotee, and I'll take him back to the spiritual world. When a devotee leaves this world, it's a very, very different thing than when a non-devotee. When we mean devotee, we mean pure devotee. Satyananda Maharaj spoke about the passing away of his dear secretary, Sadanandi Dasi. And it's a long story, but they went there next to her bed, and for 8.5 hours, they sang the Maha Mantra. And then Maharaj said that he went to use the bathroom. When he came out, he saw the nurses taking out another patient who had just died. And Maharaj thought to himself, not bad. He got to hear the kirtan when he was leaving. Huh? At that time, Sadanandi's mother was there, and she was crying, caressing the head of her daughter. And he asked the doctor, when is death going to come? And the doctor told him sometime within the next 24 hours. Her liver's dead, her kidneys are not working. She has a dangerous virus. So he said at one point there was a male nurse who came over and wanted to speak to him. And that male nurse said, I want to just tell you, it's an amazing thing. I work here where so many people die, but I've never seen this before. Many people come here to die alone. And at the time of their death, it's up to me to be their best friend, their lover, their father, mother, brother, and sister, because there's not many people who want to be there to confront death. A lot of people don't want to be there at that time. And Satyananda Maharaj asked him, why is that? And he said, this male nurse told him, he said, probably I think because they're reminded of their own death. And then their whole present life is in question, because death gives us some disturbing questions. Behind what we do in our life, is it really worth it? And so he was so amazed. He said, your chanting has created such an amazing atmosphere. I have some friends who are working we have kind of like a hospice group, the Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Vrindavan. I also have friends working in the hospice in Vrindavan and also here in Mayapur. And they have some very deep, beautiful realizations. In the Bhaktivedanta Hospital, as many people who come there, they're not devotees, but they come there with a desire to leave their body there. They may be, many of them are Muslims, but the Muslim community has heard so many good things about the hospital. And they have a system in the hospital. First of all, we were speaking about this a few weeks ago, I think, about the wonders of Bhaktivedanta Hospital and how they have music. They have Prabhupada's japa. They have the different channels, and there's a speaker in each room, and you can shift to the channel. One has a Bhagavatam class going on, another is Prabhupada's class going on, another, I think, is Prabhupada's japa, and there's another Prabhupada doing bhajan. And meanwhile, they have a special group of people there in the hospital whose job is just to go and visit all the different rooms. And they have a rolling altar with Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. And they go there and they give prasadam to everyone. And they also have a care department there for people who are getting ready to die. And they just go and console them, and they try to chant with them and help them. It's a very powerful thing. A couple of years ago, when our dear Fakir Mahaprabhu, we got news that they had to replace the pacemaker in his heart. And it was an operation they felt confident about. But when they did that, somehow they pierced one of the veins in his heart, and his bleeding started terribly bad. His stomach became huge with the blood. And we were going around trying to get blood for him and doing things. And we went to the hospital. He was in the emergency ward, and they wouldn't let us in. Finally, we kept asking. There's a whole group of us. And finally, they let one person come in, but you can't sing or anything. So one person going was chanting japa softly. And gradually, fucking Rambabu's position started getting worse. Such an MMR's phoned me around that time and was giving me some advice, I remember. And as his position became worse, gradually, one by one, we started slipping into that room, and somehow the doctors allowed us there until there was about a dozen of us standing around fucking Rambabu's bed. Krishna Kun was on the right side of fucking Rambabu's head. I was on the left side, and we were all chanting Hare Krishna at the top of our lungs. And there's so many different people there who are terminally ill, and the doctors kept coming over to us saying, they finally stopped trying to kick us out, and they said, no, you can't sing so loud. So then we'd start singing softly, which they allowed. And then after some time, we were all crying and singing loudly. I took actually these two things I have around my neck. This is Jagannath Mahaprasad and Prasad from Tota Gopinath. I put these around his neck at the time when he left his body. We were all chanting. And an amazing thing happened. As just before he left, finally, all the nurses and doctors gathered around with us. And everyone, including the nurses and doctors, everyone was chanting. And then finally we were watching his life chart or whatever the dials were again, and his heart monitor started flatlining and he left his body. And he wasn't conscious, but it was a very, very special time. The way the devotees leave their body is a different thing than the non-devotees. There are many, many things that can be said about this topic. I appreciate very, very much those personalities, those devotees and others who take it upon themselves to be there and help people when they leave their body. Lynn has this particular service. We sent her an article yesterday from the Vrindavan hospice. She comments, she finds it very inspiring as well. So I'd like to stop here. Our time's just about up. Mani Gopal Prabhu has asked if I could give the reference to the text from Vishnu Smriti. Yes, I can. Let's see. It's from Vishnu Smriti, chapter 20, text 38 to 44. I can write that in. If I forget, you can remind me. And Prabhuji's also commented, a few days back I gave a class on death, and the devotees admitted that this is the bitter truth of life, which we all try to avoid, but now we understand that it's better to get ready for that inevitable truth of life instead of avoiding the topic. In Bengal, people don't like to talk or hear about death and it's inauspicious. I think that's pretty common all over the world. People don't like to talk about death. But it's a funny thing, you know, if I'm going to go for a vacation to Hawaii or to some tropical islands or something for 2 weeks, I may plan that for a year. So I have the money and I plan my bag and exactly what I'm going to take and all these things. For a 2-week vacation, I plan it. But we go somewhere when we're leaving our body, we don't plan it. We don't make any practice for that at all. Len has commented to Prabhuji, it's a lovely practice to sit down with your first cup of tea and invite death to sit down with you and have a good chat. Yes, my mother was also like that. It's one thing I really appreciated about her. She was fascinated with death. And she was thinking about it. She told me just before she left her body, she wasn't a devotee exactly. She started to chant, so she wasn't a devotee. But she just begun. She came to Mayapur about a month or two before she left this world. And the last phone call I had with her, she called me and she said, you know, I'm always thinking of Mayapur, and I'd like to leave my body in Mayapur. And then a few days later, I got a phone call from my sister-in-law. She asked me if I was alone. And I said, yes, it is. And she said, you should sit down. And she said, your mother left her body. Mani Gopal Prabhu has commented, if a devotee has sincerely practiced bhakti throughout life, and at the time of death somehow he's not able to remember the Lord, I heard the Lord will help him by appearing in his remembrance or on his tongue in the form of a name. I don't know if you wrote that comment before we quoted this verse from Viraha Purana, which is cited by Baladevi Vibhushan, quoted by him in his commentary on Vishnu Sahasranam. But that's exactly what he says here. Yadi vatari doshinam bhakta mam shanasmaret aham smarami mad bhakta nayami paramam vitim. That if my devotee is not able to remember me at the time of death because of some disturbances in the body, Krishna says, I'll remember my devotee and I'll take him back to the spiritual world. Natalie is commenting, devotees spoil the whole party, talking honestly about death. When everybody dies, we should find Dharma's own association. Bhagavad Dharma, yes. Hare Krishna. Such an important topic. Nice to see you, Bhagavad Hare Krishna. And John, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu, for the thing I fear most in my life, death. Yeah, many of us, we say, oh, I'm not afraid of death, I'm okay. But when we almost get hit by a car, and we almost drowned. I remember some years ago, I was swimming in the Gulf of Mexico in Florida. And it was a funny day. There was kind of a storm. There was nobody on the beach. And myself and one devotee went out to swim. And we started swimming. We went out a little ways. I'm a good swimmer. I used to be on a swim team. I was a lifeguard at one point. And suddenly I found myself being caught in a riptide. And the water was taking me out to sea, out to the ocean. I couldn't fight with it. And I was trying, and I was getting exhausted. And at a certain point, I was praying to the Lord, and all of a sudden I realized that I'm so fearful about dying right now that I could see my consciousness. I'm not so attached to chanting and calling out. If I die right now, I don't know if I'll remember the Lord. Somehow I managed to pull myself out, and I had to go back in and rescue my friend. Barely brought him, and we both collapsed there on the beach. It's a good experience. It's Krishna's mercy when we come close to death. So Madhupati Prabhu said, in Krishna consciousness, everything is different. When a great devotee leaves, even though we have pain because of separation, the event gives elation to the devotees. It's said that when a devotee leaves his body, it's a viraha utsav. For us, it's viraha. Viraha means separation. We cry because we miss that devotee. We shouldn't think, oh, I'm so advanced that I don't care. I'm not attached to this body. We miss association with the devotees. It's viraha for us. But for those personalities in the spiritual world, it's an utsav. It's a great festival because now someone's coming to the spiritual world. So, any quick comments from anybody here on the point of Radha? Krishna Prem? It's got to be really quick. We're 2 minutes over time. Stand up and come closer.
Thank you so much. We were listening to this really important topic for us, for everybody in this world, just to be reminded that death is really in the corner, waiting for us, and that tomorrow business should be done today. Because usually, if we don't remember that our life is really short and it's maybe last any moment, so we just do that. We're just living that we will not die. At least I feel myself when I'm so young. I just don't feel it's so far. It's just so far. But as soon as I reminded or I hear about this or I just saw something, it's making me real serious with Krishna consciousness. It's making me think, what am I attached to? So what I'm thinking about right now. So what if I leave my body right now, right away? So what I'm going to be thinking about. So this is really important to be reminded about this.
I remember when I was 17 years old, a friend was staying with me, and we got a phone call that one of our friends who was like 16 or 17 also, he just died in a car crash. And it was such a moment for us. My great-grandmother had died before. That was another moment for me. It was difficult. But she was an old lady. But this is someone who was 16 years old and when he died. I remember that night we just stayed up all night long till like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning just talking to my friend.
Can I just share something small?
Yeah.
So my Guru Maharaj shared his experience, how he became more serious in his life. He was a student in his university. It was the best university in Russia at that moment. And one of his classmates, he had cancer, and he still continued to pass exams and think it was a kind of last stage or something. And finally he died before some of the exams, and he was thinking, I'm going to share his experience that, oh my God, he knew that he was going to die soon, week or two, but he still did these stupid things. He passed these stupid exams, and he was really, really um, shocked by this situation. It makes him think about more related things in his life. He shared this experience. Just wanted to share.
It's such a sad thing because people don't have any education to understand about death. Pancharatna Prabhu, my humble pranams, I'm very humbled that you're taking part in this. Pancharatna was one of my gurujanas, and a wonderful, wonderful devotee here in Mayapur. He's made a beautiful comment. He said there's an app called We Croak. Croak is a, for those of you who don't know, it's a kind of colloquial, it's a common expression in English to die. We croak. That suddenly reminds you about death. And he comments further. He says the Buddhists say that contemplating death 5 times a day brings happiness. What a great comment. Especially today, really, I was thinking about our friend Lynn McDougall, who works in a hospice, and she deals with death on a regular basis. And Lynn, she's becoming interested in Krishna consciousness, but she's been a practicing Buddhist for many years. So it's a nice comment from Pancharatna Prabhu. But I'd like to stop there. Thank you very much. We'll see, today is Sunday, so we'll be here again tomorrow. Grantarashim Bhagavatam ki jai, Shiva Prabhupada ki jai, Vanshakalpatarubhishcha, Kripa Sindhu Vyeva Cha Patitanam.